Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 28 of Shanalytics on Labor Day. I am joined by my guy, Vinny. Vinny, first of all, before we get into everything, Gonzaga and FSU are just starting their athletics. Things are going to be a lot of fun, but I just want to remind everyone, we're going to be doing this weekly. We're going into week one of the NFL. This weekend, we have 49ers Lions. Thursday night, we have Bucks Cowboys. The NFL is starting. Nature's healing. The world is coming back. Vinny, first of all, man, how excited are you for football to be back, man? No more Sundays without football.
I am so stoked. You have no idea, man. It's going to be lots of fun, lots of great storylines, not just from the 49ers, but other teams as well that are going to be affecting the storyline of the 49ers. Like this first, what a great week one game to have with Cowboys and Tampa Bay. That's going to be a great game. And, fantasy football season is back in full swing again, even though that was kind of the one normal thing somewhat of last year. But yeah, everybody, frantically drafting teams, hopefully winning as much money as they can. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I just want to say what's up to a few people in the comments. What's going on in Mean the Dream? Everyone, go check out Amin if you haven't already. I'm sure you have, and I'm sure if you're here right now watching, you know who Amin is. But make sure you go check him out. And shout out to Waruna as well. Vinny, let's get into our first topic though, and the kind of the thing that we've been talking about all off season, and I don't think we're gonna stop talking about it anytime soon. And hey, as content creators, I'm not too mad at this situation. For me, I got two quarterback controversies going, FSU and the 49ers. Yeah. But I want to ask you, start off with this. How do you think the 49ers have handled their quarterback controversy?
I think they've handled it the best way that they could. I don't think obviously the fans and media could have viewed it as more of a controversy. I don't think the team did. I think the team was going to do it with the understanding that Jimmy was going to have to lose the job for Trey to take over. And I think there still is some ambiguity of who's going to be starting week one, but I think more likely than not, I think it will be Jimmy Garoppolo taking those first snaps against Detroit. But yeah, I think they've handled it pretty well. They're kind of in a situation where it doesn't really, not that it kind of matters, but also like given the first 2 weeks of the season, they can go with either quarterback and feel confident about them winning. And honestly, maybe even further into the season, because, it sounding like a broken record right now, but when Garoppolo is on the field, we've seen in 2019 how much they can win. And against, some really good teams too. Like even like last year, like, the Packers destroyed the 49ers because they literally had no one. Their best player out on the field was, Fred Warner, obviously on defense, but their best offensive player that night was Richie James.
Yeah, I was about to say Richie James Jr. balled out that night, man.
Yeah, but then you saw it with Garoppolo when the team was full strength. It was like a combined score of 52-0 in the first half between both of the games that they played against each other. So. And yeah, circumstances are different this year than 2019, obviously, and they're different from 2020. They're different from year to year, but yeah, I think they handled it pretty well. I think there's an understanding from both sides, like the coaching staff and the front office and the players, that Trey Lance will be the quarterback. Obviously, one day, it's just a matter of when. And I think this is where they're going to have to, really put their, evaluation skills to the test here and make that move at the right time.
Yeah, and I think that's really the tough part about the 49ers quarterback controversy. It is such a delicate situation. I don't think there is, a real good, easy answer to how this should be handled. And in fact, I gotta agree with you, which is that was your point earlier, which was I think they've done the best they could with this situation. Like I said, it's very delicate. You look at Jimmy Garoppolo's standing with the team, how the organization feels about him, how the locker room feels about him. And I think it shouldn't be lost on people how often we talk about the 49ers family environment, the fact that Kyle has a certain way he runs things and that you earn things, right? And there is an inner circle within the 49ers, and there is that atmosphere that you don't really hear from the New Englands of the world, or maybe some organizations that aren't considered as sentimental as the 49ers are. And I think this is where it bites you in the butt, Vinny, because then when you want to try and get off players that you maybe should be just trying to get rid of, it makes it much, much harder, much more complicated because of all the team dynamics that are happening because of that. So in my mind, and I think maybe in your mind, Vinny, too, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think Trey Lance probably gives the 49ers the best chance to win, but I don't think he's outwardly proven it to the point where it's so obvious that they have to give him the reins.
Yeah,
right now.
yeah, and I think it happened like that's where kind of I guess the controversy kind of comes in. Like Garoppolo didn't do enough to assure his starting spot, but Trey also didn't do enough to take over, like really take over. Obviously you see the one throw against the Chiefs, and you're like, I've seen enough, right? But then you see the struggles that he had in the next two games, and yeah, and again, I think it just happened in both ways, and it's kind of just like they're in like a middle ground in a gray area of what they're gonna do. And again, I think Garoppolo is going to start week 1, and I don't think that's a bad thing given the what they have those first 2 games. It's just a matter of when they make that switch, and it's not a problem either if they start Trey Lance week 1. So and throughout the whole, I think they've handled it well in the sense like what you mentioned before. This is a very delicate situation, and you got to make sure that you're evaluating the right things and doing the right things at the right time. And I think moving to Trey Lance too quickly could cause a problem, but I don't think, given what we've seen, I think it could not be as big of a problem starting week 1. Like we mentioned before, I mean, given what the past few years, how many top 5 picks that are drafted at quarterback, start past week 3 or even not many, right? So, yeah, given the situation that they've had, though, I think they handled it really well, being diligent with their evaluations and being delicate when, making this right move. Because, like you mentioned, there is an emotional attachment to Garoppolo, not just from fans, but from the team, and rightfully so. Like, he was the guy that got him to their got his Super Bowl appearance since 2012.
Oh,
which is,
yeah. Well, I mean,
which is like not like a short amount of time.
No. And I think you're right about this, is that, the fans are obviously emotionally invested in Jimmy. There are a lot of 49ers fans who will give me pushback, or give a lot of people pushback when you talk negatively about Jimmy Garoppolo. And I understand it. And I think part of that, like what you were just saying too, is that not that the fans don't matter, but the team feels almost equally as the fans, who are at least part of the team, feels a certain way about Jimmy Garoppolo. And that can't be ignored. And if you're Kyle Shanahan and you genuinely believe that Trey Lance might give you a better chance to win, but he hasn't gone out over and above and proven it yet, it's really tough to just hand the reins over to the kid, like you're saying. It is just for a veteran team that was just so close to the Super Bowl and the mindset that they have, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're still in revenge tour mode, and Jimmy Garoppolo was the quarterback who they want to complete the revenge tour with. So I still think there's parts of that team that's lingering, and that is holding back the transition, right? And is delaying the transition. Now, I'll say this: the only pushback I have from preseason, from the way they've handled the quarterback situation, I think overall from a macro perspective, they've done a good job. I don't think they've screwed anything up. But I think once you start going into the details, the issue I have with the preseason in specific is when they did play Trey Lance, how they used him. I don't understand just trying to use him primarily as a complete pocket passer all the time. Now, I get that Kyle Shanahan didn't want to run zone read. He didn't want to do design runs as much. I'm not disagreeing with that. What I disagree with is the fact that they didn't move him outside the pocket enough. They didn't protect him enough in the way that they were willing to protect Jimmy Garoppolo in what you saw on the type of drives he had, right? You look at the plays that Kyle called for Jimmy. He was clearly trying to protect Jimmy. And I don't feel like that same protection was put in place for Trey. So then I think it's a situation where I don't want to say they're not on even footing, but it's almost like, Trey Lance there's a curve for the test, right? For Jimmy Garoppolo, he's going to get an extra 10 bonus points no matter what. And Trey Lance it still has to catch up while not being able to use that zone read and that running ability as much as he might like to. So that's kind of the big issue, not even big issue, just the issue I have with this preseason is I don't know how much of a fair chance Trey Lance got, even though he did get a lot of playing time. Is that fair, Vinny?
Yeah, I think it is, and I understand, that line of thinking too, because you want to, like, why not do a full evaluation of a guy and by using his strengths and seeing what he can do with those strengths. But I think also I understand why they didn't use him as much, like with like rollouts or like moving him outside the pocket, because like I think there is a sense of understanding that Kyle Shanahan knows that in a way, like his job is kind of on the line here in like the slightest way. So you don't want to, risk hurting the guy that's going to help you get your success. And who knows, maybe he doesn't get hurt in those situations, but it's especially in the preseason, it's better just to not take those risks.
Yeah.
Like if it's early in the season, then like you could fine tune those out. And there's like, trust me, there's going to be plays where Trey Lance is going to be rolling out. Like we're not going to be seeing Trey Lance just in the pocket all the time and that kind of thing. And excuse me, we saw that, in that week 3 game where he was running a bit more zone read and using his legs a bit more. And it was a progression of that. So, but yeah, you do, when evaluating a guy, you should be using his strengths. And obviously one of his strengths is his mobility. So I definitely understand that line of thinking.
Yeah. And I guess for me, it's not even more of, mobility is part of it. Like I said, the outside the pocket movement, that sort of thing, just more the protection. I feel like they protected Jimmy Garoppolo in a way that they just didn't do for Trey Lance, quite honestly. And I guess going back to what you were saying about how sure, it is very dangerous to do that outside pocket movement, but I think it's even dangerous. It's still very dangerous to play behind that second string offensive line, right?
Exactly.
Especially when you're asking Trey to play the way that they were asking him to. I think it brings up a potential lot of issues. And then I actually do worry about Trey Lance getting hurt. I mean, he did get hurt, and I'm not saying it's because of that, but he was inside the pocket, and he didn't.
Yeah.
Listen, it all these little things add up, and maybe I'm nitpicking a little bit, but I feel like in general, if you wanted to make this a true quarterback competition, you don't even have to give Trey Lance design runs. Just give him the opportunity to be as protected as Jimmy Garoppolo was. And now maybe that's not as easy because you're not working with that first team offensive line, and you don't have all the same weapons. But at the same time, we've seen Kyle design like game plan after game plan for Jimmy Garoppolo, where he protects him in almost every single way. Even then, Jimmy Garoppolo makes mistakes, but it's just frustrating to not see that same sort of effort, I feel, at least put forward for Trey. But let's finish this topic on this. Let's do like a few more minutes. I just wanted to bring this up that I believe Jimmy Garoppolo is starting week 1. I genuinely do. I think what's going to happen this season is that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to start against Detroit, and at some point in the first 6-8 weeks, potentially, maybe after that bye week, Trey Lance is going to come in at some point. Now, how that will happen, I don't know. I think the likely situation I see like going down is that Jimmy Garoppolo struggles at some point in one of these games. The 49ers need a spark in a way that Jimmy Garoppolo just can't give it to them. And then Trey Lance will maybe, have a few plays, have a drive like Kyle Shanahan has been talking about with this 2-quarterback system that apparently is going to be run. And I think Trey's going to get more and more and more. And then eventually it's just going to become obvious to the other players on the team once they see how lethal Trey Lance is with that zone read, with the explosive plays of Kyle Shanahan's offense, that it gives them the best chance to win. And once he convinces those players, to me, that's the final hurdle for Trey Lance. Because quite honestly, from everything I've been trying to see and read from Kyle, doesn't seem like he's not ready to start Trey Lance. It just seems like 49ers are in a situation where they probably wanted Trey Lance to start week 1, but Jimmy Garoppolo has looked a lot worse than people expect. Not a lot, but he's looked worse. And if anything, he's regressing at this rate. He's not improving as a quarterback. And Trey Lance isn't quite as traditionally ready as you would hope for a normal NFL quarterback. So I think they kind of run into an issue where they needed one of the guys to figure it out. And I'm not sure either of them have it quite figured out right now.
Yeah, it'll be definitely interesting, and all of this can change if Trey is named a starter week 1. Yeah,
absolutely.
Then from there, it's kind of just you should kind of have to ride it out with Trey, I think, and you got to play them all 17, 18 weeks, whatever number it is now. I don't know, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see when they make that move, because those first 5 games, those are you're kind of asking. You got after Detroit and Philly, you got Green Bay at home in your home opener. That's asking a lot from your rookie. Start his first game, Sunday Night Football, at home in your home opener against the Packers. And then you got Seattle the following week. Then you go to Arizona, and then from there, you have your week 6 bye. So maybe you start Sunday Night Football the following week against Indy. And that's still a tough game.
Indy isn't looking as good as we thought they might look. No. They might have some injuries. They have tons of COVID issues right now. There's a lot going on with them. So maybe the Colts aren't quite what we thought they were, but still, that's a huge stage to ask a rookie to start on. So I think it's tough, honestly, and that's why I see them not just going into a game and then surprising everyone and saying, "Oh, Trey Lance is our starter." I think it's going to be more of it becomes fairly obvious in the middle of a game when they are playing Trey Lance and giving him his opportunities that he's just going to be starting, and then they'll just hand the reins over to him mid-game. I really think that's how things will play out.
Yeah, we'll see, though. It'll be interesting.
For sure. And I want to go and look in the comments before we get to our next topic for everyone. Hey, shout out to everyone in the comments. I see you guys all out there. We're going to be back regularly streaming every Monday. Every other Monday is going to be on my channel. The other Mondays will be on Vinny's channel. Make sure you go check all of that out. I have his Twitter and his YouTube in the description of the bio. And just drop some questions if you guys have any questions or comments for us. Let us know what you're thinking. But I want to go to this next topic, and we're not going to spend too much time on this, but we have to talk about the newest 49er. That's Josh Norman. I guess let's start with Josh Norman. He's at a later part in his career. I think a lot of 49ers fans kind of surprised when they saw this signing happening. And I saw just before we started, 30 minutes before we started, the 49ers announced that they released Dante Johnson when they signed Josh Norman. So
that won't be for too long. He'll be back on the team soon.
But Vinny, I guess, what are some just like initial thoughts you have of this Josh Norman signing?
I forgot Josh Norman was a free agent. And honestly, I forgot Josh Norman was a player. So, like, when I heard it, I was like, oh, okay. Like, I don't think the name obviously, like, is appealing because of what he's done in the past. And he was a good player in the past. But, I don't think he's competing for a cornerback 2 spot. I don't even think – I think Lenore's better than him right now. I think Mosley's better, and I think Verrett's better. So, is there a value to having him on the roster? Yeah, I think there's some, but it's kind of in the middle. Like, it's not a bad thing having him on the team, but it's also like they don't absolutely need him. Like, I think he's better than Dante Johnson, so that's where, that's just where you can fill him in. But yeah, it's not a bad thing either. I don't think. I think having that veteran leadership, especially for those 2 younger quarterbacks that you just drafted, could help. I'm not really like expecting a ton from him, so that's why I guess like my and that's not because he's a bad player or anything. It's just like at this stage of his career, I think he understands the role that he has now. So like kind of being around in different teams after Carolina. So yeah, I mean, I'm indifferent about it. They don't absolutely need him, and Josh Norman doesn't make the 49ers a Super Bowl contender, but there's no value in, not having him on the roster either.
I guess the issue I have with bringing Josh Norman onto the roster is that is this really how you want to address your secondary? I mean, really, I think it's one of the biggest concerns on the 49ers right now, the depth they have at the secondary position. Personally, I think if your cornerback one or your number one safety gets hurt, Jimmy Ward or Jason Verrett, I mean, what are the 49ers going to be able to do now? Josh Norman isn't going to solve any of those issues. And with Josh Norman, I guess the most concerning part about this for me is that it seems like it's very similar to what the 49ers had with Richard Sherman last season, right? Where it's a guy who's a little beyond his years. He's not quite as physically and as athletically there as he was, let's say, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. And I worry that if the 49ers do have to play Josh Norman, it's going to be similar to what they experience with Richard Sherman, where they had to design the defense around game planning to not get Sherm beat, right? To make sure that Sherm wasn't going to kill them, because at that point in his career, Sherm just didn't have the speed. He couldn't keep up with the receivers. He just couldn't operate within that defense as well. And I guess, he is better than Dante Johnson. Dante Johnson will probably be right back on the roster, but I think overall, if this is the 49ers answer in terms of their depth and in terms of their concerns for their depth across the roster, this is a pretty much pointless signing, in my opinion. Now, I get that he's better than Dante Johnson, but at the same time, what are you really going to get out of Josh Norman? I feel like if anything, he's going to potentially hurt your team more than he's going to help your team. But I guess like you've been saying, like I've been saying, he's probably the 4th or 5th best cornerback on this team. So I guess there's that. But I also don't really know how long I expect Josh Norman to be on the roster. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they cut him a few weeks into the season or right before week 1.
Well, yeah, and I think the thing too is like I think like if one of those guys, like if Verrett or someone were to go down, then I don't think it would necessarily matter too much, because nobody's going to be able to fill in those roles of Verrett or Jimmy Ward. So that's where.
Yeah, well, and I guess that's my point, Vinny. It's like those are two such concerning positions already that I just wish the 49ers would have went about this offseason a little differently and maybe had gone after a higher and more talented cornerback 2 or 3 to shore up that DB depth, because quite honestly, it's not just Jason Verrett, Vinny. It's Emmanuel Moseley. He missed a ton of time last year. So I think with either of those guys, I mean, Mosley's hurt right now. It's just a concern of mine. But I'll say this with Josh Norman. I feel like if anything, he's not going to be on this roster too long. And the way I see it is that maybe Emmanuel Moseley is more hurt than we've been led on to believe. And maybe they need extra depth there and they just need bodies right now. Or maybe they don't believe in these rookies as much as we thought they might. I know a lot of people are very high on Diamador Lenore and, not as many as high on Ambry Thomas, but maybe the 49ers aren't as bought in on those guys quite yet, at least as they are, with Josh Norman. So I think it's an okay signing, but like I said, I feel like this is more either a reaction to someone else getting hurt, their confidence being low in another player. I really don't know what to think about this one.
Yeah, it did kind of come out of nowhere.
Yeah,
it came out of left field. So
for sure. And I didn't want to spend too much more time on that. I'm really excited though for our next topic, Vinny. We're gonna do a draft for everyone, and you guys can draft right along with us. Let us know what you're thinking. Let's talk about the most important 49ers. And what we're gonna do for this one is we're gonna go to Vinny first, then me. We're gonna go back and forth, and we're each gonna pick 3 players on the 49ers roster, and we're going to talk about why we think they're the most important players. So, Vinny, I want to shoot it over to you first. What are you thinking? Who do you think is the most important player on the 49ers roster?
It is the quarterback of the defense, which is Fred Warner. I think he is by far the most influential and most important player on this team. He's the heart and soul of the defense now. And you saw last year with, obviously Robert Saleh was a big help, but he kind of made that defense not look like a dumpster fire with the role that he had. And, he's paid now as the highest second paid linebacker in the NFL. So there's a little bit more pressure on him now to perform. But, given the progression that we've seen from him from year 1 to now year 4, I wouldn't be shocked to, see him back in those lists of the all-pros as an all-pro linebacker again for that first team or even on any of these teams. So, yeah, Fred Warner easily, I think he's the most important player on the team, keeps the defense intact with not just his ability to, make tackles and with his low, missed tackling percentage, but his ability to cover as well. He can cover a lot of different guys. He can stick with tight ends. He can stick with running backs really, really well. And, he's not afraid to, let you know how good he is too, which is something that, you like as a, fan of the team. You want to see your players confident, and Fred Warner is a very confident player, and he's the catalyst of this defense.
Yeah, and Fred Warner is really integral for what the 49ers do on defense. And I think really, while I've said this in the past, and I certainly am coming around to believing that the 49ers really don't value corners much, I think they do value coverage. And having a guy like Fred Warner along with Jimmy Ward, who are both excellent coverage players that you can rely on in those type of positions where you don't have to have necessarily the most, greatest shutdown corner ever. It really helps the team. And I think the big thing for me, Vinny, especially with this topic, the way I went about it, the way I feel about the most important players is if the 49ers are going to lose any of these players, how much worse off would they be without them? And I think for this first one, you hit the nail on the head, because if they lose Fred Warner, I think, that defense, the drop off that will happen would be immense. He's the heart and soul of the defense. He hasn't missed a game, and he's the engine that keeps this defense running. So I think Fred Warner, absolutely a great first pick. For me, I think there were two obvious guys, Vinny. There were two blue chip guys. They were both the top 2 ranked players actually for the 49ers in the NFL top 100. I got to go with Trent Williams as my second most important player on the 49ers. And it's because of that reason I just said at the end of the Fred Warner piece. If the 49ers were to lose Trent Williams, the drop-off between Trent Williams and what the 49ers would be dealing with because of that injury is immense. In fact, I think it would have them – they would lose games if they lost Trent Williams for a month, really. And I think the concerning thing with Trent Williams, too, is he has missed time over his career. Every single season he misses a game or 2 or 3, right? And this isn't something – this has been really consistent throughout his career. So – I'm worried about this for the 49ers. I've been worried about the offensive line depth all off season. And I mean, is it going to be Jalen Moore starting if Trent Williams isn't in there? That's scary to me. Even though he's looked okay, he looked better in preseason than I thought he would. You really want a 5th round rookie as your starting left tackle when you're trying to go to the playoffs and win a Super Bowl? I don't think so. So Trent Williams for me has to be near the top of this list as well.
Yeah. That was going to be my next pick. Trent Williams, I mean, he deserves every penny of that contract that he got. His ability, even at his age, to be as athletic as he is, and how scary that is, being that big and be able to move that fluidly. And yeah, he's that protecting the blind side of the future of the 49ers. So yeah, great signing, obviously, and yeah, he's easily, I think, a top 5 player on the team, and one of the arguably the best left tackle in football,
for sure.
One of the best offensive linemen in football at that.
Oh,
so
absolutely. So who's next for you, Vinny?
Yeah, before I get into my next one, I know this isn't 49ers related, and it was a couple hours ago, but Texans named Tyrod Taylor their starter.
Yeah, I saw that as well.
So
good for Tyrod.
Deshaun Watson's on the roster, but he's not going to play.
Which that seems like what the expected situation has been. The NFL just hasn't seemed to respond. I mean, they just haven't put anything out recently, and even though they're investigating the whole Deshaun Watson case, so I mean, things are what they are in Houston.
Yeah, and I think to relate it to the 49ers, I think they made the right move in not trading for him. and going with a rookie instead. Obviously, he would have been the best player, and like out of all the other guys that you would have gone, even if you were to trade up for Fields or Lance or whoever they were going to pick. But the contract is a bit concerning, and he is a 25-year-old hitting the stride, and you're going to be willing to pay those guys. But then you can find yourself in the situation where you're not, but maybe like a Seattle is now, where you're paying your quarterback a ton, but you're not able to get the other guys that you want. And you're going to have to fill them in with minimum guys, and that may not be the right thing. Whereas compared to what the 49ers have now, you got a guy on the rookie deal for the most valuable thing in the NFL.
Right.
Rookie quarterback. A good rookie quarterback on a rookie deal, supposedly. I mean, we don't know if Trey Lance is good or not. We haven't seen him play yet. We know he's good, and we've seen it in bits and pieces, but when you hit that week 1 in the NFL, that's when you know when they're good or not. So
yeah, with Watson too, I mean, like you mentioned, that $40 million contract number that kicks in after this season, it's really tough. It's a tough pill to swallow unless you're a Super Bowl contending team potentially. And that's why I think the 49ers are so interested in Deshaun in the first place, is because it really did feel like he could have been that potential missing piece from a championship sort of roster. It was, and not just one championship, but a perennial contender. I mean, really year after year. So, I mean, obviously the legal situation, I mean, it is what it is now. There's all kinds of terrible things he looks like he did. It seems undeniable at this point, and the NFL is going to make some kind of reprehension potentially at some point, maybe, but or at least I hope so. But let's get back to Let's talk about we were drafting who we think the most important players on the 49ers are. Vinny took the first pick. He took Fred Warner. Excellent first pick. I got Trent Williams pick number 2. Now for you, Vinny, with your 3rd overall pick, who do you think is the next more important player on the 49ers roster?
I'm going to stick with the defense, and for the same reason that you would say, Trent Williams, I'm going to give those same reasons for Jason Verrett. I think Jason Verrett, we know how good he is based on, obviously we know injuries have, held him back from being the player that he is. But, when they signed him in 2019 and, seeing how he played in 2020, he looks like a bargain now for what they signed him for. He's looking like a shutdown number 1 cornerback, and this is what the team needs. And, every good team in the NFL has that. And so, or should have that. Maybe they have more, focus towards linebackers and edge rushing, but, you give yourself a little bit of that extra edge when you have that good, elite cornerback. And like you mentioned with Trent Williams, if Jason Verrett were to get down, there's nobody on this team that could replace Jason Verrett and, how good he is. So that's where I am to believe that he is the second most important player on my list of the people that we gave.
And with Jason Verrett, I mean, there is that injury concern. Even though he's had his healthiest camp, he looks better than he's ever looked on the 49ers in terms of going into a season. That concern's always going to be there with Jason Verrett. I mean, he literally didn't play football for 4 years almost. So if Jason Verrett were to go down, then Mosley is cornerback 1. I don't think you want that. And then even then you have injury concerns with Mosley. So then you're looking at both your corners potentially not even playing. And to me, you go back to that Miami Dolphins game last season when the 49ers just got killed by Ryan Fitzpatrick. You're potentially walking into similar territory if you lose a Jason Verrett midseason, multiple weeks at a time or a month. I don't know how the 49ers would be able to survive or sustain that kind of stretch. I'm sure they would figure out something, but really, I feel like that could be a season swinging type of move where if Jason Verrett goes down, could really completely change the outlook of the 49ers season.
Yeah, exactly.
So I hear you on Jason Verrett. The next guy I want to go to is on offense, though. I'm going to go George Kittle. Because while I think Ross Dwelly is a well enough backup, while I think he can replicate and he can do some things and he can fill that tight end role for the 49ers. What George Kittle does for this rushing offense, along with his passing offense, his blocking ability, the way he's the identity he's the identity of the 49ers offense. If the 49ers were to lose George Kittle, it would be a major problem, really. And I think we saw how much of that affected the running game in the past few seasons. When George Kittle did miss time, there was a significant drop-off in the 49ers' ability to run the ball effectively. And then the offensive line struggles because of that. And then the passing game, it's just a domino effect where if you don't have George Kittle doing what he does, blocking the ball, it really becomes a bigger issue, and it can affect the rest of the team in a way where it can derail your offense for a game. So, yeah, George Kittle, he's the number one receiving option, obviously, for the 49ers. And, I mean, if they were going to lose him, it would really excuse me, it would really really make this team worse off in a really tough way. While, like I said, Ross Dwelley is not bad. It's not a knock on Ross Dwelley. I think this is just more about how great of a player George Kittle is and how effective we've seen this team been when he hasn't played.
Yeah, and George Kittle is one of the 53 best players in the NFL. Like, if you were to make a 53-man roster, of all the best players in the league, George Kittle is on that team. Not maybe he's tight end 2 behind Travis Kelce, but you still have George Kittle on your team because of what he can do, not just with the passing game, but, mainly with his run blocking. And, we saw the run game struggle a little bit last year when Kittle wouldn't play. And you saw, they weren't able to execute the, jet sweep as much because of, Kittle's the guy setting that edge. And, just this charisma, too, his enthusiasm is missed out on the field when he's not playing. And as much as, that may not directly affect his actual play, it does affect, the locker room. It does affect it in a way. Yeah. So,
I mean, he's the heartbeat of this team, really.
He's the heartbeat of the offense,
He's not quite a traditional leader. He's not like a CEO quarterback. But in terms of just voices in the locker room, George Kittle's voice is super important. And when you don't have that kind of voice in the locker room, it's felt for sure.
Yeah, and he does it in a very unique way. He doesn't do it in like a Jason Witten kind of way.
No.
Like his leadership is more shown like through his like effort out on the field. He's kind of like, because like obviously he's like a funny guy and he's a very extroverted individual, but he's not gonna like be the guy that's gonna always give like that rah rah chant. And if he is giving that rah rah chant, you can't really. It feels like he can't take it 100% seriously. Whereas Fred Warner's giving that chant, and it's like you are just like locked in. Right.
Yeah.
So,
and this isn't a knock on Kittle.
No, absolutely not.
He's always having fun on the football field. And I think that's the thing that you have to point out.
And he's crazy too. Like he is like you think he's like extroverted and like like he's obviously a fun guy and stuff, but like he he has that like persona of like he likes the Joker. Like he turns into the Joker when he's onto the field. He is just like a crazy madman looking to,
right. He
blow
has
anybody's
that
head
personality switch when you see him get onto the field.
Yeah, and that's his zone. Yeah, and that's his zone. Like so that's something that like that you really, value on your team. So
for sure.
Yeah, clearly he's one of the most important players on the team.
Oh yeah, and he's just his style of football is so physical, and it just really sets the tone in a way that I don't think any other player on this team quite does. So, I guess, Vinny, for you, who's that last player you're looking at on the roster? We each picked 2 players so far. I just want to remind everybody for the most important players. Vinny went with Fred Warner. I went with Trent Williams. Vinny went with Jason Verrett. And then I just picked up George Kittle. So, Vinny, who do you think is that next most important player on the 49ers roster?
There's a lot of defensive guys that you could say. Like, you could throw in Bosa, obviously. You could throw in oh, geez. You could throw in Tart. You could throw in Jimmy Ward. I'm going to go offensively, though, and I'm going to go with Brandon Ayuk. I think
you think so?
I think Ayuk is a very important player, similar to the reasons given for Verrett and for Trent Williams. Debo is a suitable one in a way. Like he's kind of been a one, and it's worked. But looking at is Sanu going to be reliable too? Is Sherfield going to be reliable too? Are any of those guys going to compete to know what you can get from Ayuk? And especially, that was just a glimpse of what we saw from Ayuk year one.
Right.
Like he could just go elevate his game to a whole different level. And I think just his versatility, not just, his, receiving, like not just him catching the ball, because he has he had a couple drops in the preseason, but his ability, what he can do, like with the ball in his hands, after the catch, that's something, very valuable that obviously not many other guys on the team can do. So I think Ayuk is going to be a very important player, especially if there are times where Kittle has to miss a couple games. He's going to really have to step up.
Yeah, and Ayuk, I think really with me, the only concern with him so far is we keep seeing those soft tissue injury issues kind of pop up from constant kind of hamstring nagging stuff. I would be worried out throughout the course of the season. Listen, I'm a huge Ayuk fan, but I think really that's my main concern with him right now is he going to miss 2-3 games at a time because he pulls his hamstring or he pulls a calf or one of these soft tissue injuries, which we see these big, physical players who have built up their bodies a certain way, which you just have to do in the NFL. We see so many more soft tissue injuries. So that's my worry with Ayuk. But overall for Ayuk this season, in terms of his importance to the offense, I think it's huge. He offers that wide receiver one type of upside that I just don't think there's any other player that can quite replicate what he does in terms of his down the field play, in terms of his route running, and in terms of his potential as a deep threat that just hasn't even been unlocked yet. I think it's hugely important for the 49ers success. And I think it's important for what Kyle Shanahan wants to do with the future of his offense. It's going to be Trey Lance eventually. And what that's going to look like is a lot of running, of course, but then big explosive plays and play action, right? It's not as many of the Jimmy plays where it's 15 yards over the middle, 20 yards over the middle. Kyle's going to be looking for deep shots. And to be able to get those big explosive plays, you need the right playmakers to do those sort of things. And I think Brandon Ayuk is that type of playmaker for the 49ers.
Yeah,
and
he is.
That's what they need out of him. Not just – I think they needed it last season, but then, gosh, going back, watching last season, Vinny, the ball placement was awful. The quarterback play that he was getting was really bad. And I think no matter who the quarterback is, Ayuk will be much better. I think he'll be much improved. I think he'll look better. But I think if they do hand over the reins to Trey Lance, then I think things
that could be a scary duo if it works.
For sure. So Vinny, the last guy I wanted to do, I almost picked him last round, but I had a feeling I would get the opportunity to take him here. So I wanted to take that opportunity, and I feel like that bet paid off. But for me, that next most important player on the 49ers, it's Jimmy Ward. I think if anything were to happen to Jimmy Ward in terms of the 49ers defense, I'd be very concerned for them. Similar to Jason Verrett, where if there was an injury and he were to miss 2-3 games at a time, a month, let's say, how would the 49ers be able to survive for that month? I mean, he's their best coverage safety right now. The 49ers really don't have many other good even coverage safeties when you look across their roster. And if they were going to have someone else play instead of Jimmy Ward, to me, maybe besides Jason Verrett and Fred Warner, that would be the biggest concern for me. And I even think Jimmy Ward is better than Jason Verrett, but I think, the drop off from cornerback is so much steeper than the drop off is from safety. But I still think overall, Vinny, like the depth issue for the 49ers with their DBs, it's my main concern right now, really. I think if they get one injury here or there, then you just start losing games because of that. And the 49ers with how they're trying to contend, with how the aspirations they have for this season, I just don't know how they can really be very confident that they're legit Super Bowl contenders when you have these kind of depth issues, right? Because we saw how hurt the 49ers were even in 2019 when they did make it to the Super Bowl. And yeah, I just think there was a lot more depth on that team 2 years ago than there is on this team currently. So yeah, if they were to lose Jimmy Ward in any sort of way, I think the impact on the defense would be immense. And I think it would be a huge downgrade for the 49ers.
Yeah. Jimmy Ward is huge. Just, when you can have that guy that versatile and that can play, almost any position at your DBs, that's something that you don't want to lose. And we could have said so many other players too, right? And that we're just talking about like the solid, like even just like the solid players that, could, see a jump from last year, right? We're not even talking about guys like Eric Armstead, DJ Jones, like even like Mike McGlinchey, Alex Mack, and we're not even talking about the most important position on the field, the quarterback, right?
Right.
Like those are two guys, right, that could, are very important to the success of this team. And, it just shows, how you really need every single player to, show up as much as they can. D Ford, we know how important he is when he plays.
Yeah.
And Dre Greenlaw and like all these other guys that,
and everything's a domino effect too. That's the thing.
Exactly.
That's the really concerning thing. It's because if you do lose, let's say Jason Verrett, or you do lose Jimmy Ward, losing them versus losing Nick Bosa. Listen, Nick Bosa might be better than those guys, right? But having to play without those guys versus having to play without Nick Bosa, to me, it's much more challenging because you can't replicate the things that Jimmy Ward or Jason Verrett can do back in the defensive backfield. Now, I'm not saying anyone can quite match what Nick Bosa is as a pass rusher, but you can still find ways to get pressure on your defense. The issue becomes when you have two elite coverage players. And listen, Jimmy Ward's been healthy lately. He's been healthy the last 2-3 years. I'm not saying he's going to get hurt, but when you look at Jason Verrett and Jimmy Ward and their careers and how often they've been hurt, for the 49ers to be so reliant on them, to me, it's the biggest concern on defense right now, that they are so reliant on that top end talent in their defensive backfield.
Yeah, and I think it's just the DBs, because I think linebackers, like, again, if Fred Warner gets hurt, I don't think it matters who replaces him. They're not going to be able to replace him in any way. But exactly. I mean, the D-line, I'm not really concerned with the depth. Like, Bosa is obviously the best one down there, but, they showed last year they're able to get production without Bosa. But I'm not – that's not to say they can go without Bosa. They need Bosa if they want to win a Super Bowl.
For sure, but the point is that they can find alternative ways to create pressure if they
exactly.
You can't replace Jason Verrett.
And we're not even talking about
not in any way.
Yeah, we're not even talking about K1 Williams too. He's huge.
No, we aren't. I mean, that's one of the other weird things of training camp. No one's talked about K1 Williams, right? It seems like at all. So I mean, I hope he's playing well. I hope he looks good, but we literally haven't seen him at all. So that'd be nice if we could get some reporting on that. But just any final thoughts for you, Vinny? I guess I just want to say this. Mainly, 49ers are a good team. They have good starters, but there's real depth concerns once you start looking at some of those really key positions where the 49ers have had injuries. And while we talked about that defensive line, the fact that they can replenish if they do lose D Ford, if they lose Nick Bosa, they have ways that they can create a pass rush. The issue just becomes when you lose players at other positions where you have no answer, right? You can't replicate anything they do, and you're going to lose games because of it. Like the 49ers were so bad against that Miami Dolphins team. That's that game that should stick in 49ers fans' minds when you think about the potential issues for this team this year, and I think the same goes for the offensive line as well. I think the 49ers have 4 good offensive linemen, and then beyond that, if one gets hurt, things get scary. Across every level of the offensive line, even Lincoln Tomlinson, really, I think so. I would be concerned about the depth issues. I think that's the thing holding them back from being Super Bowl contenders versus playoff contenders. I think they're playoff contenders for sure, but to win a Super Bowl, you need to be great. You need to be lucky. You need good depth, and you need a lot of luck. And
the thing that'll affect them more, I think, is the timeliness of those injuries. I think that saw last year, when literally all your best players are out, you're not going to win games as much as you may want to. Like, it's going to be really hard to do. And
and with 2019, the injuries, while they were happening, right, 49ers were able to sustain those injuries and figure something out so that they could still, have at least be in games versus, like I said, that Dolphins game last year. That just
It also helps when your quarterback played every single game.
For sure, absolutely. So, but still, I mean, there were Joe Staley injuries, George Kittle injuries.
McGlinchey was out for a bit.
McGlinchey was out for I mean, there were all kinds of injury issues in 2019. But Vinny, let's talk about Week 1.
Oh my. That sounds music to my ears.
It is Monday, September 6th. the NFL's about to launch in 3 days, I believe. Thursday night, we're going to see Bucks versus Cowboys. But right after that, Vinny, we got the 49ers matchup of the season. 49ers versus Lions in Detroit, week 1, 1 o'clock this Sunday. Let's start with the 49ers defense versus the Lions offense. I think this is the most interesting part of this game to me. We were talking a little bit about this beforehand, but when looking at Detroit, I think it's very obvious that the defense is not the strongest part of their team. In fact, they might have one of the worst defenses in the NFL overall. But what the Lions do have is actually one of the better, if not one of the best offensive lines in the league when you look across it. Frank Ragnow has been excellent as a Pro Bowl level center. Their left tackle, Taylor Decker, has been very good as well. Good starter, not quite a Pro Bowl or all-pro player, but a very solid
They just drafted Sewell.
They just drafted Penei Sewell. He's playing right tackle for them. And when I was looking this up, I saw that Matthew Stafford, I believe last year was 7th in terms of time to throw, and in terms of getting the ball out quickly. So this offensive line has proved a lot. Now Jared Goff is going to be there. It's going to look like a much different offense. They're not going to be passing the ball quite as much. In fact, they don't really have many receiving options at all outside of their number 1 tight end, TJ Hawkinson. They have Tyrell Williams, who made some noise in Las Vegas last year. But beyond that, their second wide receiver is very questionable. They're relying on rookies at that point.
Yeah.
I don't think this Lions offense is going to give the 49ers defense the biggest challenge. But what I'm really interested in from this game is seeing how good the 49ers defensive line truly is, right? We've been talking about this all off season, how deep they are, how good they are, how many players that we were like, wow, the 49ers are going to have to cut this guy or this guy, and he's going to make another team immediately. Now, the 49ers were able to retain most of their players, but like I said, you want a good measuring stick to see how good that defensive line is. This is, to me, a very good matchup in terms of trying to figure that out for the 49ers week 1. So I think if you're going to be watching this game, number one thing you got to pay attention to is the 49ers defensive line versus this Lions offensive line. And how much are we going to see out of Nick Bosa, D Ford, guys like that? It'll be interesting.
Yeah. I think D Ford is going to be the guy that Nick Bosa versus either not Ragnow. Who's the tackle?
It's going to be Taylor Decker or
Decker,
depending on which side he lines up.
Either against either tackle. I think that's going to be a good test to where Bosa's at in his development, coming back from his ACL, and his development as a player. This is only his second year fully playing. It's good for the Lions that they have this, good offensive line. They got a couple good running backs too that they can throw in. They signed Jamal Williams. They have DeAndre Swift.
They're going to be running the ball a lot.
Yeah, they're going to run the ball a lot. They do have Hawkinson as that tight end option. And, like you mentioned, Tyrell Williams and Marhunt St. Brown, looking like those are going to be the wide receivers. But, you can have all the time in the world if the quarterback has to make those throws. And, I think that's where Jared Goff is successful. Like, if you give him time, he's going to make a lot of throws, and he's going to make those throws. It's just up to the, not just the D-line to get that pressure, but, scheming from D'Amico Ryans to, have that secret blitz coming in from K'Wan Williams from time to time, like they like to do last year. And, it's going to be really, as much as, like, people, like, want to dog on the Lions and how much they stink, this is a really good test for this 49ers team.
For sure.
Especially defensively. Like, it's not going to be it's going to be like, I think it's more of a competition, like 49ers defense versus the Lions offense rather than the other way around, because I think the 49ers can score points on this defense.
Yeah, and let's talk about that. I was just looking this up to make sure I was absolutely right. Last year, the Detroit Lions had the worst defensive grade in all of football per PFF. They ranked in the 40s. This is an awful defense that didn't even acquire many players either. They have Jeff Okudah, who they drafted 3rd overall, of course, last season. But besides that, I would ask people in the comments without going to Google, name as many defensive players as you can on the Lions. I don't.
Yeah, I'm looking at the list now, and there's a couple familiar names, like Michael Brockers is on here. Jamie Collins, is on here. Like you mentioned, Okuda, Trey Flowers.
Yeah, but
like other than that, though, it's looking pretty thin.
Yeah, and there was a reason that this is the worst defense in football last season, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So I think the 49ers should be able to put up points on this team. I'm just curious to see how much they're willing to rely on Trey Lance, because I think it's going to – the way I see this game going is that I think the Lions' offense will push the 49ers' defense, but I think the defense will make a few stops. And then at a certain point, the offense will just be hard to slow down. They'll be scoring uncontrollably, I believe, the 49ers offense. So I guess then my question is, Vinny, if Jimmy is starting, right, the offense is rolling, let's say they have a 17-point lead, 3 scores at least. Do you think they would just consider putting in Trey Lance for the rest of a game at a certain point if it looks like a secured victory? Or do you think this is a thing where they just – you can't quite mess with that chemistry quite yet? You have to, like we said, it was such a delicate situation. You don't want to create any imbalance. So what do you think about them potentially inserting Trey Lance in at some point?
I have a hard time seeing them doing it mid-game. I have a hard time seeing it. I think if they were to play Garoppolo and start him, they'd start him for at least the whole game.
Okay.
And I think there is a situation, though, where they do just put in Trey mid-game, and it's just when you make that switch, and we've talked about it, but when you make that switch, you got to stick to it. And I don't know if they're necessarily ready. If they're ready to make that switch, they're going to do it to give him a whole game, I think. And it would help to give him more snaps, obviously, but I don't see them, especially with a 17-point lead, because what if, there's a blown call and a blown defensive assignment, it's a 10-point game, then Trey gets a turnover, then it's a 3-point game, and then one possession game. Then you're stuck with, should we put Garoppolo back in or should we just let him? Because let's just say it how it is. 49ers fans are going to be upset either way, whether they win or lose somehow, some way. Especially given the past few months. But they're to lose this game, it's going to be absolutely insane. Like, I don't know, how people are going to take it. People are going to be calling for Shanahan's head. Oh, for sure. They're going to asking people to trade Trey Lance, even if he doesn't play. Why did you draft him if you're not going to play him? It's going to be a madness.
So let me ask you this then, because obviously we don't know how this game is going to happen, but I think we have a feeling of how 49ers fans kind of how the fan base is segmented up in terms of the quarterback they believe in, right? I think it's very clear there are two camps right now. I would say it's about 60-40. Trey Lance probably edging out Jimmy, even though Jimmy looks like the likely starter. I guess, let me ask you this, Vinny, Jimmy Garoppolo were to play poorly and the 49ers were to lose, then what do you think the response is from there?
Well, then I think they make this switch to Trey.
Okay.
And then from there, I think it's kind of
you got to stick with Trey once you start him.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, I think if when they make that decision to switch, they got to stick with it. So, if he does play, it'll be interesting though if he doesn't play as well as what we thought and they win. That's where it kind of gets a little tricky. That's where you kind of it's a little bit easier of a decision if they do lose, because then you can just be like, okay, Trey, your turn.
Exactly. Yep. If it's like a 10-point win for the 49ers and Jimmy Garoppolo, let's say they're leading most of the game and Jimmy Garoppolo makes it closer than it has to be. He makes those mistakes, those interceptions we've seen him make before, and they edge out the game, right? But it was very much looking like a situation where Jimmy Garoppolo could have blown it because of his poor decision making. Then, like you said, that's where things get super complicated. And I don't really know what you do from there. I think you got to probably start Trey Lance, but then you went ahead and started Jimmy Garoppolo anyways, so that makes you look indecisive. Or maybe, it's a really delicate situation like we've been saying this entire time. I don't think there's an easy answer, and we're just going to have to play it out and see what happens and react. And I think Kyle's doing the same thing, honestly. But I think they're going to get Trey Lance some play no matter what. He's definitely going to –
Oh, he's going to play. He's going to play.
But I'm really curious how much in week 1. We'll see how committed Kyle really is to this 2-quarterback system that they've been calling it. We saw Jimmy, talking to Drew Brees. We saw Trey Lance talking to Drew Brees. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be exactly like that, but hey, Kyle's an offensive genius, right? He's one of the best offensive minds in the league. Let's see how he can handle this 2-quarterback situation.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be really interesting. One of the biggest challenges he's had in his time at the 49ers. So I'll be curious to see how he handles it.
Yeah. And give a score prediction here. I'm going to go – I think the 49ers win, obviously. I think they get the win. I'm going to go 31-17.
I'm going to go very similar. I'm going to go 49ers win 37-17. That's how I see it. So there we are. Everyone, let us know your score predictions in the comments too. We're going to round out this show by talking about the NFC West though. And you know what? Let's start in Los Angeles. We've just been talking about Jared Goff a lot, but Rams have a new quarterback, Vinny. Rams traded for Matthew Stafford over the offseason. They lost some of their depth on defense. They lost guys like John Johnson, Michael Brockers, but they still have Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey, who are maybe the 2 best defensive players in the league right now. They're the best at their position, at least. Now, first off, let's start with this. What kind of record do you think that the Rams will have by the end of the season? And then after you give that answer, I want you to tell me if you think they're legitimate Super Bowl contenders.
Yeah. I think you're looking at 11, 12, 13 wins from this team. I think like you mentioned, the depth, like each team has their own, set of problems where it could go really, really well for them, or it could go really, really bad. And I think the problem with the Rams is that depth. Right? You lose Troy Hill, you lose Johnson as safety, you lose Brockers, but I don't think it's going to be as big of a problem. I mean, you lost Cam Akers too, torn ACL. But they just traded for Sonny Michel. So, but I don't think those problems matter as much because, like you mentioned, they have the 2 best defensive players in the league, 2 of which are probably generational talents and first ballot Hall of Famers. Aaron Donald is easily the best defensive player in the league. And I don't think it's close. No, but I think
he might be the best player in the NFL. I mean,
and people don't. But on the same line, people don't give enough credit to Jalen Ramsey of how good he is, and I think he's like the closest player that you could compare to and make an argument for as someone who is better than Aaron Donald. He's the closest guy for me. Generational talent. And not to mention they have Matthew Stafford now, and that's going to just allow Sean McVay to get into his bag and really become an even better head coach. For me, he's a top 5 head coach in the league. He hasn't had a losing season yet. He's gone to the playoffs every year. He's been a coach except for 1, and he was 9-7 in that year. And they still have some good players. They still have Tyler Higbee. They still got Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods. They just got Gerald Everett, right? Gerald Everett went to he went to Seattle. So I don't think they're as big of Super Bowl contenders as maybe Tampa Bay, or even Green Bay, given their struggles. Like Green Bay, they have Aaron Rodgers still, and he's playing. So he's playing for Green Bay. So I think those are the 2 that, are going to give them the most trouble. But yeah, I have them first in the division. I have them winning the NFC West. And so yeah, I think they're still a really, really good team. That's going to cause a lot of problems. And they could be the number 1 seed. And I wouldn't be shocked if they were the number 1 seed in the NFC.
And guess what? This year's Super Bowl is in Los Angeles.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, hey, we're talking about back-to-back potential Super Bowl champions in their own building. What that would be something, wouldn't it? I think with the Rams, right? I just want to give my record prediction first. I think they're going to be a 13-win team. In fact, I think they might win more games than that. If they're not the number 1 seed in the NFC, they're top 3 in my opinion.
Easily their top 3. Easily.
You laid it out well. There's 3 very great. There are 3 great divisions this year in the NFC. The Bucks are very obviously head and shoulders above everyone else in theirs. I wouldn't say the Packers are very obviously, but that next team, I don't think they're quite there with the Packers. And then you look at the NFC West, I think it's going to be loaded across the board, but one of those teams is going to have to be that number 1 team. And I think the reason it's going to be Los Angeles more than anyone else is just because of the improvement that we're going to see at the quarterback position, right? While we're concerned about some of that depth that, like we were talking about across the board, you mentioned it. The upgrade from Matthew Stafford from Jared Goff to Matthew Stafford, to me, is going to make a bigger difference than anything else in this division, unless Trey Lance comes out and is Patrick Mahomes year 1, right?
Yeah.
The thing with Stafford, with the Lions, for so long, he would get certain elements of it, right? He would have a good head coach, and then they would have some good key players. And then right when everything was going pretty well for them, they were getting closer to the playoffs, then Matthew Stafford gets an injury, or they lose one of those key players to free agency, or, something happens. It was always something else with Matthew Stafford. So I just hope with him now, he doesn't have that same experience where they have a key injury.
Mm-hmm.
What I will say is I still think they're one of the best defenses in the league. And I do think they are legit Super Bowl contenders. In fact, I think they're more legit than the 49ers are this year.
Yeah, they are. They are.
For sure, in my opinion, because like I said, that upgrade from Jared Goff to Matthew Stafford to me is going to be the biggest difference in the entire division.
Yeah.
And to me, I think that's what, when you look across the rest of the division, yeah, you could argue that the Cardinals got better. Yeah, you could argue that the Seahawks could be better, or the 49ers could be better. But I think there's no question that the Rams will be improved.
Yeah.
When I look at it that way, and I'm questioning the rest of this division and how much they really got better across the board, I think the Rams are going to win this division. I think they're going to go deep into the playoffs. And I think it's just a matter of them beating Green Bay or Tampa to get to the Super Bowl, like you said. So I'm all in on the Rams this season. I'm not doubting the Rams whatsoever.
Yeah, and going back to the 49ers a little bit, you can't look at the Rams games as what you've looked at them in the past 2 years.
Nope.
You can't at all, because if you do that, then you're gonna lose. They're gonna realize. You're gonna realize.
Well, and the big difference is no Jared Goff, but you know what is another huge difference, Vinny? No Robert Saleh either.
Yeah.
So that to me is one of the other things where 49ers fans are assuming they're just gonna roll the Rams. The Rams are a pushover opponent. They're 4-0 against them. They dominate them, but the Rams are not the same team that they were last year. They aren't the same team that Sean McVay has had. And to me, this is Sean McVay's best chance to win a Super Bowl these next 2 seasons, and I expect him to take full advantage of it.
And if the 49ers win both games against the Rams this year, that is very telling about how good this 49ers team is. So
exactly. It's a good measuring stick for sure, just like the rest of this division. And you know what? Let's go to the next team. Let's go up in your area of the country, Vinny. Let's go up to Seattle, Washington. For the Seahawks, give me a record prediction at first. How many games do you think the Seahawks will win this year?
It's annoying to say, because you look at their roster every year and you think that they're not going to win 10 games. They're going to win at least 10 games this year somehow, some way. I don't know how. I don't know when. They're always the best team in football in the first few weeks of the season, then they kind of tail off. But they're going to win 10 games at least.
And Vinny, this year,
at the very minimum, they're winning 10 games.
10 wins this year does not guarantee you getting into the playoffs. While there's expanded playoffs with 17 games, going 10-7 isn't going to be just a shoo-in to get into the playoffs anymore. So even if the Seahawks do win that number of games, that doesn't mean they're definitely going to be a wild card team. Doesn't mean that at all.
And then they're going to win 10 games because of one player, and his name's Russell Wilson, and he plays quarterback. He is a top 3 quarterback in football. He is going to, give them life every single week. And DK Metcalf's development is helping. Tyler Lockett still being there, like we mentioned, Gerald Everett. I'm more pro Chris Carson. I think he's a really good player when he doesn't fumble. but he had his fumbling issues a couple years ago. He's cleaned those up. And, they do have Jamal Adams. And, as much as people want to make fun of him for, being a linebacker, he's really good at being that linebacker.
At what he does,
he's really good at it.
He's excellent.
Yeah, and that's not even to mention Quandre Diggs, who's one of their better defensive players too. They got Kerry Hyder from the 49ers. DJ Reed seemed to emerge as that cornerback one, and I think there are some similarities between the question marks between the Saints and the Seahawks and the 49ers, specifically at depth positions, at the cornerback position, and on the offensive line. Like if the offensive line, it's even worse in Seattle. Like if Dwayne Brown goes down, then they're in real big trouble. And like if Jamal does go down, or if Reed goes down, or whatever, obviously Bobby Wagner goes down, I don't think they're going to be in trouble. So I think they're going to win 10 games at least. I think I'm going to push it closer to 11, and I think they are they're a playoff team this year, and I think they finish. I could see them finishing fourth. Maybe this is the year where I'm finally wrong about, I finally switched, not going to doubt the Seahawks, and this is the year that they don't make the playoffs and they're finished fourth. But I think I'm going to play it safe on my end, and I'm going to say that they're going to finish second in the division.
Yeah, so for me, Seattle, I'm right there with you. I'm at 10 wins. I'm not going to push quite to 11, though. And my main concern is that depth issue with the Seahawks. It is concerning. And while Russell Wilson adds a certain floor to this team, I just don't know how high the ceiling is for the Seahawks. In fact, I think we've seen the ceiling in the last few years. They're a playoff team potentially who can win a game or two, maybe make a little bit of noise, but they're not Super Bowl contenders. And I think the issue just goes back to Russell Wilson. It's how much money you're paying him, right? We talked about Deshaun Watson earlier. Russell Wilson is the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. He's among the highest cap hits every single year for Seattle, or just in the NFL in general. So for Seattle, they have so many top-end players they're relying on between Russell Wilson, between Jamal Adams, between Bobby Wagner, DK Metcalf, that you have one injury here or there. You mentioned Dwayne Brown, Quandre Diggs. It's that domino effect we were talking about before. Things just become harder and harder for the rest of the team to be able to operate. So I think for me, I'm not saying Seattle is going to be terrible by any means. I just don't think they're going to be quite what they were in the last few years. I think they're closer to a 9-10 win team. And the way I see their season going is, like you said, they'll make some noise at the beginning of the season. They'll look good at certain points throughout. They'll have nice stretches, but I think in the last 4 weeks of the season, they'll be just on the edge of the playoffs, one of those potential wild card teams. And I think they just won't quite make it. And I think they're going to finish third in this division, with the Rams finishing first in the division.
You say you have them third or second?
Third. I have them third in the division.
Okay.
And it's really,
I think
just
it flips,
because, I'm sure we'll get into it, but I think those first three teams, I'm pretty solid about the Rams, the Seahawks, and the 49ers being the top three teams in the division.
Yeah.
Now, would I be surprised if Arizona were to overtake them? Not necessarily, but that's just not my expectation currently. I just think the NFC West is so good. They're so loaded. I'm just not going to doubt Seattle so much, even though I don't think they're going to be quite what they were.
It's not crazy to see if we were to see the whole division in the playoffs next year. Oh, that's not crazy to think of.
Not crazy at all. And then let's get to that last team. I just mentioned them, and I was trashing them a little bit, but let's talk about Arizona. Well, first off, before you give your prediction, Vinny, let's get into some of these offseason additions that they made. They did lose Patrick Peterson to the Vikings. That's a huge loss. They really don't have a ton of secondaries, cornerback depth specifically. They've been in all kinds of trade rumors for that, but they added J.J. Watt over the offseason. Chandler Jones requested a trade at some point. They added A.J. Green as well. And then I believe
they have Rodney Hudson.
They took Isaiah Simmons the year before, and then they took that linebacker, Zaven Collins, in the first round this year. So, Vinny, what's your record prediction for Arizona?
I think they're at a max. They're going to win, I think, 10 games, but I see them more, 9, 8, or 7. Yeah. I think the cornerback depth is the biggest concern for them. I think Byron Murphy is their cornerback one. That is a little concerning. I think they do have some good pass rushers, and again, they could really, flip the switch and be on top of the NFC West, which wouldn't be completely shocking, but I think it would be a little surprising.
Yeah,
because Kyler Murray is good, and they do have, they signed James Conner. They got DeAndre Hopkins, still one of the best wide receivers in football. Adding AJ Green, I think, is going to help a little bit too. But I just don't know about Cliff Kingsbury, man. I don't. For what they could be as an offense,
that's
it's just so basic, and it's like the route concepts and the scheming is just so basic, but they could be so much better. And maybe this is the year that they make that jump, but we don't know because we haven't seen that. And another concerning thing too, like, I'm sorry, but as much as I appreciated CJ Beathard being on the 49ers, you cannot lose to him at home in the week 16 must-win game. And you can't put up 9 points. I'm sorry. You can't.
I think if you look at Arizona's season from a more macro perspective, you just mentioned that 49ers game. Let's talk about that Bills game that they should have lost, right? If they don't win that game, that's a 7-9 football team. I'm not saying it should change people's minds drastically, but you look at them as a below 500 team instead of a just 500 team going into this season. I think it changes people's perceptions a lot. And I think the Cardinals were in a lot of scenarios where they could have easily lost more games than they did win. And I think they were lucky to get some of the wins they got. I mean, that Bills game specifically, but there were a number of games where the Cardinals just quite hanging around. Maybe they shouldn't have. Now, the thing with Arizona for me this season, I'm right with you. I'm at 8 or 9 wins. I think 9 wins really max, maybe 10, maybe if other things were to happen in the division. They have overwhelming talent. They have really good talent across the board. I mean, there are some positions of concern, like we said, depth issues, certainly, but I just wonder if this talent is going to be able to overcome the lackluster coaching. I just don't think they will be able to. With Cliff Kingsbury, he hasn't proven much to me so far. And if anything, he's just proven to me that he's not head coaching worthy and he's not NFL worthy at this point. And I think what Arizona is going to be in a very tough situation if they lose again this year. That's why they went all in the way they did. They have to win this year. Otherwise, people are going to start getting fired, not just Cliff Kingsbury, but that GM too, even potentially. So yeah. I think when you look at Arizona, this is really a make or break year for them. No matter what happens, if it's a boom year, it's going to be a great year. If it's a bust year, things are going to get really ugly really quick with that team. And I think they're going to finish 4th in the division. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. And I think the way I see their season going is similar to Seattle last year. I think they'll have some nice stretches. In fact, they might even go undefeated for a month or 3 or 4 weeks at a time. But I think the downside that Arizona has and all that we've seen from Cliff Kingsbury, just how kind of undisciplined this team is, honestly, how lackluster the offense is, how vanilla it can be at times. Not even vanilla, just predictable even at times. Yeah, I don't believe in Cliff Kingsbury, and that's not me, not believing in Kyler Murray. I just think with Cliff, with the way they've set up everything in the organization, they have good talent, certainly. And if they had a different head coach and if this was a different division, it would be a completely different conversation. But unfortunately for the Cardinals, there are 3 head coaches that are better. There are 3 coaching staffs that are much better. And there are 3 rosters that are comparable, if not better, to what Arizona has. Therefore, I think they got to be 4th in the division, unless there's a major injury, right? There's a major injury to Russell Wilson or Matthew Stafford or someone on the 49ers, right? That would make sense in terms of the Arizona going up the pecking order, but I just don't see them making that leap this year. Now, I think J.J. Watt will make them better, but even some of the additions like A.J. Green, I don't really know how much A.J. Green has left in the tank. I know he's a good player, but he just hasn't been able to get on the football field and stay on it. So I really don't know how much we can expect from Arizona this year. I think it's going to be somewhat similar to what we saw from them last year. It's going to be a lot of highs. There's going to be some lows too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think there could be a very volatile football team. But that's where we're going to end today, everyone. We're out of topics. Thank you so much for sticking around if you did. If you're not subscribed already to my channel, make sure you go and do that. Drop a like on this video if you haven't already. And go subscribe to Vinny's channel, because next Monday, we're going to be back on his channel. We're going to be reacting to the Lions 49ers Week 1 game. Hopefully, we'll be talking about who the quarterback will be. So just look forward to that, everyone. I'm going to be trying to stream the rest of this week too. Follow me on Twitter. Make sure you stay updated on that. I'll be putting out everything on there. Thank you so much for watching. Again, we'll be back on Monday. So look forward to that, and have a great rest of your Labor Day, everyone, if you haven't enjoyed it already.
Peace.